Very quickly, we all know, where India lives, but I just want to give you a little details that you have these large cities with populations above a million. There are about 48 of them, and while these account for 12% of the population, they do account for 25% of the consumption. And most of us sitting in this room have been focused around these 50 cities for our marketing efforts and for building business. Right? And what we have failed to recognize is that 75% of the consumption takes place outside these 50 big cities. Even if you talk about organized retail, the government is now talking about organized retail being fixed for these 50 cities only. But the real consumption is happening at in smaller towns and villages. And there are three growth stories that are playing out simultaneously in small town and rural India. And I will start with the small town story because that is the most significant. So you have these small towns with populations less than a million and going down to even 10,000. But there are about 500 out of these 7,800 odd towns which are in the 100,000 to 1 million population. And these are really the ones which are driving growth. Okay? Now, what has happened is that if you look at the metros, about 10, 15 years back, Delhi, Mumbai, most metros took the decision to throw out the small and medium industries, which are polluting industries, from these big cities. And these were relocated in the smaller towns. Okay? So, it is really the industrialization of these smaller towns which has now become the new engine of growth in these small towns and I'll just take an example of one town. Mark had conducted a study of what is happening in small towns, but obviously I'll not have the time to go into my details. But I'm just taking the example of one town. This is Rudrapur on the way to Nainital. It was an entirely agricultural town, okay? A rehabilitation town for the Sikh community where they set up agricultural activities. In the year 2000, when Uttaranchal was formed as a state carved out of Uttar Pradesh, the then Chief Minister N.D. Tiwari set up an industrial estate in Uttaranchal. Cut from 2002 to 2012. This is what Rudrapur looks like now. So the total population of Rudrapur in the year 2002 was 80,000. It's 160,000. So the population has gone up 100% in just 10 years. Okay. There were a total of 100 small kirana stores in this town. There are now 1,200 organized retail outlets. You can talk of any brand that you can see in Delhi, from Reebok to Nokia to Samsung, and these are standalone stores, 1,200 of them. There was no English medium school naturally in Rudrapur. There are now 30 English medium schools with 20 of them centrally air-conditioned schools. Yeah? Aware that I've been to a couple of these. So Rudrapur has got completely transformed. And this has happened just because of industrialization. Tata Nano was the first plant to come up in Rudrapur. You've got Colgate, you've got Nestle, you've got Britannia, you name it. Okay? So all these companies have set up their factories there, so obviously their executives have moved in there, therefore their housing needs, their education needs, their marketing needs, all that has transformed this small place. To give you an idea about real estate, we met up with somebody who had bought an acre of land for 400,000 rupees, just 4 lakh rupees, in the year 2000, and he sold that land in the year 2012 for 4 crore rupees. Okay? In just a period of 12 years, he got an appreciation of 10,000%, which is 1,000% appreciation every year. And this is what is happening to many small towns. We studied Ahmednagar, we studied Vapi, we studied Bangalore for different reasons. So Bangalore is because of the IT companies having set up their training centers in the space. Okay. So the reasons could be different, but really speaking, the demand is now coming from these small towns. So what you're seeing is that the total consumption in these small towns is the same as the total consumption of the top 50 cities, but everybody is focused only on these 50 cities. Because the concern is that how do I go from those 50 cities to 7,800 towns? But as I explained, that you actually need to go to only 500 towns which are in the 100,000 to 1 million population. So that's the story number one. The story number two is agricultural transformation. We know that things are not happening at a pace that most of us would like it to happen. But the reality still is that agricultural production has gone up by 25% over the last 1 decade. And minimum support prices of wheat rice have gone up by 100%. Okay? Inflation, of course, has gone up by 7% over the decade, but there is a net gain on the price, and of course, the production also hasn't gone up 25%. So there is a double whammy: better price, more production. And that is the other factor which is driving consumption in smaller towns, in villages. And of course, the fact that the Indian monsoon graph, if you were to study it, is 1 good year of monsoon, 2 bad years of monsoon, 2 good years of monsoon, 1 bad year of monsoon. So whatever farmers make, the next year they have to eat from their own cash reserves, and that's why they could actually never increase their incomes. But now what is happening is that with better monsoon and better production, they are able to buy many more things. The other thing which very few people are envisaging and understanding is that the minute we talk rural, people equate rural with agriculture, which is no longer the reality. Already, sitting in 2012, I can tell you that the share of agriculture is less than half the share of the total rural economy. And by 2020, which is not far away, the rural economy will contribute almost two-thirds, the non-farm sector will contribute almost two-thirds to the rural economy. Now this is good news because agriculture has its own vagaries, it has a lot of risk factors at the time of production, in the market, right? Whereas non-agricultural income is much more steady, and I'll explain to you in the slides that follow as to how it is leading to stable incomes in rural India. And rural India, just rural India, not counting small town India, is already a $1 trillion economy, which is the size of the Canadian or the South Korean economy, which are considered very advanced economies. So if you add the small town economy, it takes it to 1.5 trillion out of the $2 trillion economy of this country. So 75%, as I explained, is already there. Now this is a very interesting visual where you see the classical pyramid with almost half the population living on less than $1 a day. And we have purposely taken $1 a day and not the global $2.5 because that is not really what is relevant in our situation. So what you find is that this diamond, pyramid is going to morph into a diamond where the poor are going to shrink from 400 million to 50 million. The middle income is really going to expand to 500 million, and the rich are going to treble over this period. Now let's see what is driving this in each of the three segments. So let me first take the bottom segment. We all know about the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, which is brought in on an average 35,000 crore rupees through wages paid to people in rural India. So that is the kind of money that's getting added into the rural economy. We are also clear that this is not sustainable. The government is not going to be able to continue to keep pumping in money through the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. But what is sustainable is that the open market wages have also gone up because of the NREGA wages. And NREGA wages were revised 20% recently. So proportionately, the wages in the open market have gone up, and these are sustainable. Right? So the farm labor, the road labor, they are now all getting much better wages. So that is what is going to pull And this projection, this is the modeling that we've done at Mark, and this is done on the basis of the 7% GDP growth at a time when we were growing at 8-9%. Of course, we're now down to 5.3 and maybe 6% next year. But if you take over the decade, one hopes that the GDP growth will maintain at about 7%, so therefore this should be good. If you take the middle segment, this is very interesting that more and more young people in the middle segment are now taking up jobs in the nearby town because they are educated. Okay? Earlier, you didn't have road connectivity. So till about 10 years back, only half our villages were connected by road. Today, it's more than 75%. So all villages that matter, which means these 75% villages that are connected by a road account for over 90% of rural wealth. So these young people are now taking up jobs in the nearby town because commuting has become much faster. Because earlier they would have to take a bus, it would take them 2 hours one way, 3 hours one way. Now they buy their motorcycle, and we've got Sanjeev sitting here from Hero Motorcorp, and he will tell you that they now get almost 50% of their sale from rural India, for which half the credit goes to him, but the other half credit goes to the government for laying out the roads. For ensuring that people can now actually go and take up work. And our projection is that in every rural family, in every farming family, you will have one person engaged in a regular salary job in the nearby town, which means that rural incomes will become much more steady. Because right now rural incomes are around 2 harvests, and if one harvest is poor, then it's really only around 1 harvest. So this will now become much more steady. At the top end, what is happening is that villages that are closer to towns and cities, their farmers, the big farmers, have been selling out their land, as we've seen in Gurgaon and Noida and all these places. So a lot of wealth has come to them from this sale. Now, how they reinvest this money and whether therefore this is sustainable or not is difficult to say. But also, in the non-farming community, again, people are taking up jobs in nearby towns and cities. So this is what is driving this growth. And since I don't have the time, I'm not going to be able to take you into deeper insights. We can take you layer by layer, but I'll have to sort of just give you the top line insights. And the way I talked about India 1, India 2, India 3 in terms of the 50 cities, then towns, and then rural India. Similarly, you have 3 Indias horizontally in rural, which is the most developed states, the developing states, and the least developed states. And if you look at some numbers, it becomes very clear if you say TV ownership. Now, almost every second household in the developed states has a television set. Whereas when you come down to the least developed, it is only a quarter of the number in the most developed. So these are striking differences from one region to another region. So India is a very diverse country, and the minute we talk about rural, then it becomes even more complex. Right? So naturally, companies that are going to get interested in the rural markets would first look at the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit is really the most developed states. That's where they're going to start by selling their products. So there is a way to look at how to open up these different markets. And both for small towns and rural India, Mark has developed a very complex, very detailed market attractiveness index, in which we've used some 19 indicators, and it's an interactive model where you can give different weightages to different factors, and therefore you can decide for your product category, out of the 7,800 towns, which would be the most potential, out of the 6,000 blocks in rural India, which would be the most potential. So you could really go granular and pick up those markets which would be attractive to you. And we market that tool, so anybody who's interested could talk to us later. The challenge is that if you look at the distribution of rural GDP, it is almost the same in all the 3 regions. The developed areas have about 30% of the rural GDP, developing is another 36, and underdeveloped also 36. So it's about the same. And therefore, in the long run, companies cannot afford to ignore any one section or segment. Okay? Of course, they will start with the most developed. But that's why companies like Levers and ITC and Everready and Classical, the key companies and the earlier companies, have to ultimately open up the entire rural market. It cannot be just selected into any one region. And the good news for marketeers, because the challenge for marketeers always was that these are my urban consumers and these are the country bumpkins and the country cousins whom I don't understand their buying behavior, their shopping practices, right? All that is beginning to change because of this whole process of urbanization, where with good road connectivity, internet connectivity, the difference between rural and urban is really melting. And that's why if you see the share of household spending, you find for many categories it's now becoming similar. You take health. Whilst the per capita income in rural India is half of the per capita income in urban India, but in terms of percentage spending out of their family income, on health it is the same. On clothing it is the same. On durables it is the same. The real difference is in food. Because, when you earn only half, your hunger is still the same. So you have to spend a higher percentage of your income on food. But for other items, it's beginning to become similar. So therefore, the rural consumer is also becoming more understandable and critical. I'll just quickly take you through some very interesting trends that are changing. More and more rural people are now buying packaged goods simply because they have more income, they have more money to buy. In the past, they didn't have money in their pockets, so when they went to just a rupee, they would only get loose oil or a little bit of tea or whatever. But now, because they have more money, they're able to buy packaged goods. And interestingly, the reason they give us is that we can make out the freshness of the product. Right? Because we know that the manufacturing date is written in every case. Right? Earlier, whether they could do it or not, they didn't have the money in their pockets, so they didn't have that choice. Today they can exercise that choice. So that is showing that the rural incomes have really been rising. This is a very significant insight that Unilever found starting 2010 for the first time. The total, the growth of sale in bigger packs outpaced the sale of sachets, which shows that people are now earning more. You and I buy, when we go shopping with our wife, we look at economy packs, right? Because we have money in our pocket. So we are looking for what's the value we are getting out of it. Whereas the poor in the past had no money, so they went to the rupee and whatever they got, that's what they could buy. So there was no question of comparing economy with the price. So this is going to be a trend in the coming years. That I was reading of a report recently, just found last week of Karnataka. There was some organization which has done a very deep study in rural Karnataka, and they have found that economy sales of most products have outshot the sales of the smaller sachets. So we are moving away from that sachet thing, because that was a reflection of the poverty of the country, whereas the economy is reflecting the prosperity. So that pyramid morphing into a diamond is clearly showing that the entire rural India is fast moving from poverty to prosperity. That's the way it is moving. Okay. And I'm a great optimist, so I know that some people feel that there are many problems still, and which I accept, which are ways unacceptable that 30% of the population is still living below poverty, 30% of our villages are still not connected by road, 75% of people don't have toilets in their homes. But it's the way you look at that rural glass, so whether it is half empty or half full, and since there's so much bad news all around, that I'm an optimist and I feel that we need to be looking at the good news. This is a myth many companies have encountered and then made a mistake of trying to introduce cheap products for rural markets. Not realizing that rural people don't buy cheap products to buy value for money, because their money is far more hard earned. John Deere is the most expensive tractor in this country, and it has been registering the fastest growth out of most all the tractor companies in the country. Right? So that clearly shows that rural people are not looking at cheap products; they buy a more expensive product because they feel more value. Earlier, it used to be one brand, if at all, a packaged good entering the rural household. Now we find multiple brands in the same category. And what Nitin Parankoy of Unilever said the other day was that he visited somewhere in the CEO of Unilever, he visited some rural homes, and he found the same woman using Lux for her body and Dove for her face. So it's not only multiple brands in the same family, but it's also multiple brands by the same person. So this is showing the growing prosperity in rural India. If you drive through villages of India, the hoarding that really catches your attention, the wall painting, there is English medium school, convent school, English medium school. Because rural people have realized that the passport to success is English. And I think one of the claims to fame that all of us have in this room is that we can speak great English. I was in a village many years back in UP, doing a study with the World Bank, and I saw this poor rural woman. And I said, what is the one wish you have for your children? She said, my one wish for my daughter, and she was specific for my daughter, is she should get English education. So I said, why English education? She said, आप मेरे सामने बैठे हो, तुम आप अंग्रेजी सीख रहे हो, आप जानते क्या हो? She was right. We're all pen pushers. And that too because of our language. If we didn't know English, none of us would be sitting in our position that we are sitting today. So that's what is happening in rural India. And believe to me, most families in rural India today are spending between 400 to 600 rupees a month on private tuitions for maths and for English. This is common. When we encountered this the first time about 10 years back, we were really amazed that rural people out of income of 5,000 to 7,000 rupees are spending 400 to 500 rupees on private tuition, but that's the way it is because they feel this is a huge investment which will get their children much better off in the world in later life. Aspiration in rural India are becoming the same as urban India, and these are two symbolisms of that aspiration. One is, of course, the mobile phone. Today there are 330 million connections in rural India. And I always tell this example that when mobile phones came to India in the early 90s, it took urban India 10 years to go from 0 to 100 million. Rural India did that in 5 years, not 100 million, 200 million in the first 5 years. So therefore, there is prosperity and there is money. If you have the right product, which will serve the needs of people, they will end up buying. And the same thing with this direct-to-home disconnection. When it was introduced for the first time, all these companies looked at the urban market. But today, if you see, more than half the connections are in rural. Right? And this involves a fair amount of investment that will have to make. Rural India is all about understanding the grassroots, understanding the local needs, and not bringing global products and bringing them a little cornflakes from Kellogg's and just and sell them and work that way. Rural India, you have to really innovate products from the bottom up. And the two classic examples are curry, which incidentally, we should always hear the story of Nirma versus now it's the story of wheat versus curry. And some of you may not know that in January of this year, curry became the largest selling detergent in the country. So curry has done to wheat what Nirma to serve. And how they achieved it? Many factors, but I'll just give you one or two. They have mapped the water condition of every state of India in terms of hardness, softness, and depending on which part of the country the consignment is headed, okay, so if it is not UP, they will look at the water map of UP and what is the hardness thing, and they will add softeners accordingly, and similarly for other regions. So that's the way they have customized the then in terms, because in detergents, the main thing in India is we think the more lather it makes, the better is the product. Whereas lather has nothing to do with washing clothes, okay, or cleaning the clothes. So that's why it's important to add more softness so that it gives you the lather. So like that. The point simply is that regional brands are now beginning to score over larger brands, national brands or global brands because of the fact that they have their ear to the ground. They sell products which are needed. Okay? Let me give you another example. You have this harvester combine, which is a big machine which runs through fields. You may have seen it, driving on the highway. Now, the tire of this vehicle, each tire costs about 20,000 rupees. So 4 of these tires, they are gigantic 7-feet tires. 4 of these tires will cost you 8,000 rupees. There is a small tire making company in Meerut called Randu Tires, and we had them over a couple of months back at a conference. And their MD said that he now has almost 90% share of the harvester combined tractor tires because he said we realized that the harvester combine throughout its life will not cover more than 1,000 kilometers. Because, it works on this field, goes to the next field, but it doesn't go 500 kilometers, from Punjab to Rajasthan to work on the field. So, they then studied the tires and found that these were some 16-ply tires. So they said, what is the need for all this? So they've come out with an 8-ply tire. And they've given a lifelong guarantee because they know that even an 8-ply tire will last 25,000 kilometers and that vehicle will never do more than 1,000 kilometers. So, that's how they have captured the market. So you really have to have your ears to the ground to understand the need of the local consumer. Yeah, this I have already told you that direct to home, more than 50% of the connections are in rural India. Okay, so which are going to be the fastest growing sectors in the coming decade? I'll just take it through them very quickly. The consumer goods segment, obviously, because the consumption levels in India are far below even the Asian consumption levels. So you will see a huge growth in the FMCG industry. And out of this, if you break up this 300%, which is the overall growth, rural will grow by about 400% over this period. So it is really rural which is going to drive the growth because it's on a smaller base, the consumption levels are much less, the penetration levels are much lower. So that is what is going to drive this growth. The education sector more in the area of skills, not formal education, but skilling people. This is going to be another very fast growing sector. The health sector in rural India, right now it is largely the government which is providing healthcare in rural India through the community health center, the public, the primary health centers and sub-centers. So 80% of the healthcare is provided by the government and 20% by the private sector, but by 2020 it is expected to reverse. 80% of it will be in the private sector and only 20% in the government. So obviously the health sector will grow dramatically in the next decade. Also the transportation sector with road connectivity becoming much better and agriculture produce going up, so there will be a lot of movement from the villages to the urban areas and a lot of movement of consumer goods from the urban areas into rural India. So that's going to really grow. And if you look at this, except for FMCG, all the other sectors are the services sector. The interesting thing is that if I take the rural GDP, just the rural GDP, agriculture is now, by 2020, will only be 1/3. Out of the remaining 2/3, manufacturing is not very much in rural India. So it is really going to be the services sector. And already the services sector is as large as the agri sector in rural. So the real growth is going to come from the services sector, not so much from the manufacturing sector. So what can go wrong? I mean, this is, I think, everybody's concerned that the real rural growth started happening from the year 2004 when the Congress government came to power and they had their focus on the rural sector, whereas the BJP was much more focused on the trading community and the urban sectors, and that's why they had the India Shining campaign, and that's why they lost the election, because India will be shining in urban India, but urban India doesn't count for the votes. So In the 2014 election, if the Congress doesn't return to power with the BJP alliance, then possibly we may not see the same attention, the same focus that we've seen of the Congress government, whether it was the employment guarantee scheme or the Aadhaar or many other initiatives that this government is taking. In rural India they say there are two gods. So one is Sarkar Maiga and the other is the rain god. Right? So the rain god also has to be benevolent. And India is going to be all about skilling our workforce. So we keep talking about this demographic dividend that we are 50% of our population is under 25, so therefore we can be the supplier of the workforce of the world. But the fact is that we have the lowest formally skilled manpower in the world at just about 4%. South Korea is about 90% plus, Germany is about 70%. So we will have to skill these people, only then they will be able to earn more. If I'm a daily wage labor, then I can only earn 100 rupees working on a road construction site or whatever. But if I get trained and become a mason, then possibly I can earn 300 rupees with the same time that I spend. So it's really going to be about skilling our workforce. We are a country of jugaad, so I want to end with jugaad. That's what we are, and we will find our solutions. Thank you very much.